This is Dawn Vallandigham with Spins. I lead the retail team here. And today I'm lucky enough to have Gavin Conkle with me from Earth Fare Market. Welcome, Gavin.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining. So would you mind for our audience telling us just a little bit about your title, what you're doing at Earth Fare these days, and maybe even just a little bit about your background and maybe how you ended up in retail?
Yeah, sure. I'm Gavin Conkle, Director of Grocery for Earth Fare. That is one of the titles that I have. We're all hands on deck here, so I have my hands in a lot of different honey pots. But I grew up on a 600 cow dairy farm in Hesbury, Michigan, which is a very, very rural town of, not even a town, it's a village in Michigan. But growing up on the farm, I always wanted to be back in the food industry. I wanted to make my parents proud and get back in the milk industry, actually, which is where I started my career after graduating from Western Michigan University and with a degree in food marketing, food CPG marketing.
Right.
So started off in the dairy industry with Prairie Farms Dairy, Midwest, one of the second, I think the second largest dairy in the United States. Was there for 4 years. Got my first taste of retail actually with Fresh Time Farmers Markets in right outside Chicago.
Okay.
So I was there for roughly 2 years. Went through explosive store growth there from 14-ish stores to 54, and that's kind of where it was nonstop all the time, and we were opening roughly 20 stores a year for that year plus or almost 2 years that I was there. When I left Fresh Time, it was kind of like leaving a girlfriend or something like that. You're married to the job, right? Like you're in it all the time, 24/7. So it really, like the second that I left, it hurt, knowing that somebody else was going to be overseeing the stuff that I managed and all that kind of stuff. So that's when I realized my burning desire for retail. Had a couple stints on the sales side and just didn't have that passion, that everyday change, ability to impact every single day that I felt on the retail side. So I got back with Earth Fare back in August of 2019, and just tried to do the best I could with what I had. Went through a couple highs initially, getting a lot of placement of new items, launching tons, working with brokers, which I love to do, looking at the data, the trends, how the Southeast with Earth Fare was totally different from the Midwest with Fresh Time. But then we went through the downfall with Earth Fare, liquidating everything the first week of February of 2019, going into the pandemic, looking for jobs, then hearing that this could come back, and then being one of the first people they talked to bring back and lead the grocery team.
Wow, that's quite a ride. That's a significant COVID ride you've had.
Yeah, I was talking with Amazon in Seattle with their new grocery concept. I
Yeah.
was talking with retailers in California. I was talking with retailers in the DC area, and Charlotte area. So it was insane, and that was obviously at the height of the pandemic, and or at just the beginning. So people, instead of flying, you were starting to do virtual interviews, all that kind of stuff. So it was just
That leads me to a great question, which is why back to Earth Fare? I mean, you've been through so much with them. There must be something that drew you back to them, something about the new Earth Fare Market, where you're
well,
going, what you're doing. What were a couple of the big things that made you say yes to going back?
Well, I think it was just like this is going to sound funny, but initially it was just 4 or 5 stores, right? So
Right.
the pandemic played a lot into it because, I'm engaged, recently engaged at the time. And, it was like, hey, do we try to make a move to Seattle? And Seattle was obviously one of the first hot spots. Do we try to move
Right.
out to California where there's increased expenses and, not knowing if Kathy would have a job or not. So the more I got to think about it, it's just like, it was leading the grocery, the revival and owning grocery 100%.
Hmm.
Putting my vision and what I believe was going to, evolve Earth Fare to be better than it was previously. Old Earth Fare had a lot of its flaws, but there's obviously a lot of good things at the same time. And I just knew, like, if we just get back to the basics with a lot of the retail stuff,
Right.
an updated pricing strategy, updated vision, you
Mhm.
know, me owning that entirely, you know, having a better dairy strategy than we had before, having just a, you know, um, redoing space of sales throughout the entire grocery store,
Mhm.
reallocating space to categories that were growing but were underutilized at Old Earth Fair. So it's just like it was a project, but
Right.
it was also one of those things where it was a good career bump for me because of the title, right? But then
Mhm.
knowing that there was going to be a tremendous amount of work that could, you know, create a ton of value for our guests and our consumers who shop the store. But
Yeah.
then building relationships with operations, you know, all that stuff. It's been it was
Right.
just a huge challenge, huge challenge.
How many stores, just for our listeners, how many stores did Earth Fair, you said kind of came back with 5 or 6, how
Yeah,
many are you at now? And then where are you guys headed?
yeah. So initially it was 4 or 5, then it was 8, then it was 12, and then you know, there's an unknown to that right now. But today we
Right.
have 16 stores open. We're going to open 2 more stores in January, so we'll be at 18 by the end of the month.
Yeah.
Fort Mill and Seminole are on target to open midway through.
Congratulations. That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
And then it's just, you know, it is an unknown.
Mhm.
I'm thinking we're going to be somewhere, obviously above 20 and, you
Mhm.
know, upwards of 30 by the end of 2020,
Wow.
2021. Sorry.
There you go. That's
But
okay.
yeah, yeah. Um, but yeah, somewhere along there. And then, you know, obviously as our stores continue to do better sales, you know, there's some financial backers that are they're going to help us out to
Sure.
get closer to what Old Earth Fair was and become a good solid regional player here in the Southeast.
What a fun job. I mean, really to get to be on the ground floor of that after you kind of saw how it went and then get back in there. I can feel your passion. You're a fellow retail nerd. I can just sense it. I love retail. I love the pace of retail. I also love something that you said, which is the data. You kind of mentioned, you've got a lot of strategies. I heard pricing, I heard
Yeah.
assortment, I heard shelf. How have you, maybe even in your previous life, or as you think about partnering with spins, how is that data going to help you make those decisions? How do you think about the application of data to really propel you to where you're headed?
Yeah. So data is obviously really fun. You know what's challenging with our stores is we obviously are in a lot of different states today. We
Mhm.
pull from 3 different unified DCs.
Yeah.
So we have different planograms for just about every single store, which coming from, you know, Fresh Time, we basically had 1 or 2 planograms for
Yeah.
dairy and a handful, you know, we had core stuff. Here
Hmm.
we have a lot of uniqueness. So
Right.
that's where I rely on a lot of vendors and, you know, a lot of outside support with spins or soon to be spins
Hmm.
coming up with this new concept. But, you know, it's, you know, we have limited space in our stores, so it's, you
Right.
know, we have to sell the best of the best, and we have to use data to back that up. And when we're able to take risks, but we want them to be calculated risks. So if we see a new brand that's trending, you know, maybe not in the Southeast but in the Midwest or out in California, it's helpful to see that data and then see what the potential impact could be if we did bring in a new brand into the warehouse or whatever. So data plays into that. And once we get more involved with category management, which we haven't totally today because of how COVID, sorry, which we haven't totally today because of how COVID has impacted the supply chain and
Right.
continues to impact the
Right.
supply chain. That's where in the next 6 months, as you know, COVID hopefully dissipates a little bit, we're
Hmm.
able to go back to basic category management and really impact the
Right.
categories.
Yeah. Some of the blocking and tackling that you can really attack
Yeah.
with that data.
Yep.
You mentioned two things I want to key on, and then I'll kind of get closer to wrapping us up here. One was you mentioned a little bit about innovative items. What role do innovation and using that data? What role does that play? You think in your growth, for
Yeah.
specifically for Earth Fair markets, and as you guys think about what role innovation plays.
Yeah, innovation's huge. You know, I think the challenge with not going to a trade show for the last year plus, I mean, that's impacted a lot of retail. It's impacted a lot of innovation at the same time. With that being said, because we're so lean as an organization, I think that makes us able to act so much faster.
Hmm.
You know, if a broker's got a really good relationship with us, you know, and it's a hot new item or they perceive to be a hot new item, again, we're able to activate that really fast. Um, Going back to opening Earth Fair back in June 22nd for one store, getting anchor account status out of our Atlanta DC. being able to bring in new items to that, it's been huge. Simultaneously with that, we went through I want to say a 600 new item launch at the start of October, I believe. And then we went through another one that was 300 to 400 items back in December. So our ability to execute and get the products out into the stores, I think has exceeded what we were able to do at Old Earth Fair.
Mhm,
And our timelines are much quicker. You know, if it's a new item, we get on it right away. And,
mhm.
you know, there's just less BS, to be honest. You know, there's
Yeah,
less, I'm the gatekeeper right now.
I like
Unifies, able to act when I tell them to act. And that's been
that.
great.
Mhm. I love it. Yeah, I think, I mean, it sounds like the innovation is key to bringing in those customers, keeping them there. And, I know we're looking forward to partnering exclusively with you as a retailer on our innovation database and really being able to identify those items early,
Yeah.
well earlier, quite frankly, than they even hit in any kind of mainstream. So it's exciting to think about that partnership. And
Yeah.
where, how we're going to be able to kind of, again, be not only retail nerds, but data nerds as it relates to really just propelling you guys. Because as you add more stores, that is going to be critical to make sure that you're kind of staying on top of those trends.
Yeah,
Uh,
for sure. And I will say that too, like it's impactful in our stores because like, you know, one thing that's taken off is obviously e-commerce and
right.
e-retailing and all that kind of stuff, right? You can't necessarily, I mean, some companies sure can really promote the new items in there, but people see new stuff as they walk into it or
Mhm.
accidentally walk
That's
into it
right.
because it's a new item in the store. So, you know, innovation, we have the ability to be top of the line when it comes to first to market and
Mhm.
we definitely want to take advantage of that as much as we
That's a
can.
really good point about, in order to get that innovation in front of customers from an e-com perspective, that's pretty tough. So,
Yep.
we've got some tricks up our sleeve on how to do that as well, but it is not an easy task. You really do have to be first to market when they physically walk in there.
Yeah.
Two more questions. One was, you mentioned vendors a little bit earlier. You kind of mentioned the vendors are going to be critical with the data. Can you just talk at a top line, if vendors listening, what do you want them to bring to you? How do they make your life better, easier, faster, making decisions? Here's your chance, Gavin. You've got the camera to tell a vendor how to be a good
Yeah,
partner.
so KP, obviously we're going to work together with Spins. We want a very specified um, key things. You know, as I bring in category managers, I want them to learn the right way, and
Okay.
I want specific data to be almost handed to us, right? Like, you know, I don't want there to be a 30-page document.
I love
There's
it.
no need for that, right? A lot of that stuff can be sent through an email where we don't waste paper or anything like that. But as we get into meeting face to face, if that happens over the next 6 months, these are the five pages that I'm looking for. You know,
Okay.
I'm obviously looking for the brand sales trends. I'm looking for the category sales trends. Eventually, when we get to Earth Fair comp data, we want to see how the performance
Mhm.
is year over year in our stores. So things like that, and then obviously we want to know where we're at from a competition standpoint.
Mhm.
Are we in line on pricing? Or are we out of whack on pricing? Are we promoting this item enough? Again, once we get more in tune with promotions and monthly promotions and things like that, how does this perform at this price, and how does this perform at a more aggressive price? And did we make money off that, or did we give money away? So those, you know, as we simplify some of those things, but at the end of the day, like five things that are 5 pages of stuff that I'm looking for every day.
Yeah, I love that. I think that was a great synopsis. I'm sure there's folks taking notes based on that, as well as, the innovation piece. So people bringing in the true trends, the true attributes that are driving customers to purchase certain things and really
Yep.
understanding what's driving that. So, well, you've been amazing today. So much information that you've shared. Your passion is palpable, with where
Mm.
you're headed, which is amazing because I'm sure you're tired. But
We
we
are tired.
so thank you. We do like to end every Spins Cast with one question, which is a little bit of paying it forward to others who may be new in the industry or younger in the industry. Is there a piece of advice that you would share, for those coming into retail, something that you've learned in your career that you could impart upon us as we close today?
I think it's just paying it forward is a good thing. So I think that's what I try to do on a daily basis. So you know, for the holidays, and this is just me, I always didn't matter what job that I took on, I always try to go above and beyond, right?
Mhm.
So the days leading up to Thanksgiving, I actually spent majority of the days in the store,
Mhm.
working side by side. Um, some of my counterparts that are on the ground daily, right? I was
Yes.
throwing eggs, I was throwing milk, I was throwing butter, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
So just, going above and beyond for not just your company, but your teammates as well. I mean, they see that, they appreciate that. I don't just sit behind a desk. I like to interact and see visually who's buying what at the store. And a good way to do that is just work in the store. Then during Christmas, I was a bagging specialist. I've never bagged groceries in my life. But after about the 200th one, I got pretty good at it. So
Yeah.
all hands on deck. It's things that eventually, as I bring on category managers, I want them to learn as much as they can from me, and not be afraid of taking on too much.
Right.
One of the big things that I got going on this year is going to be private label.
Mm.
No one else in the company is going to take a look at that. I got to take a bite out of it myself and allocate the time and resources to do
Mm.
that. But yeah, just do as much as you can, and if you've got a passion for it, it's not too much work, even though it sounds like a lot.
Yeah, I love that. I think you learned hard work clearly back in your Michigan days and being on a farm. I think any of us would say, and I'm imagining if they put you in a store, they just throw you in the dairy department. Is that what they do? Yeah.
Yeah, I ask.
Yeah. Well, this is Dawn Melaningham signing off with Gavin Conkle from Earth Fair Market. Thanks so much.
Thanks.